So I'm going to introduce our first plenary speaker. It was one of my priorities to get Yiannis Laouris here because of the fascinating work he's been doing on conflict negotiation, especially in Cyprus between the Greek community and the Turkish community, but also he's been doing work in Israel and Palestine, which if anybody switched CNN on this morning will see has just ratcheted up into a new phase of conflict and looks to be getting worse. So this is rather poignant, but systems thinking contributes something. So I'll hand over to Yiannis.
I just wanted to share with you the noise. This is the noise of the project that I will be mainly talking about. It's a project called Act Beyond Borders. It was a 4-year-long project funded by the European Commission, and the idea was to do conflict resolution and peace building between Israelis and Palestinians. And what you see on the screen are a lot of video clips for many different events that have taken place during these 4 years. It has been a very challenging project for us because it's funny, if you want to do conflict resolution in an area in which there is conflict going on while you are doing the conflict resolution, the biggest challenge is not to reconstruct the conflict in your workshops. Because this is what usually happens. And to transcend their thinking outside of that room, outside of their real world, and bring it inside the room is really not so easy. Especially when, for example, Hamas arrests our partner, the Palestinian partner, and they put him to jail for a couple of days, and they hit him, and he's bleeding, and then they release him, and then the Israelis do the same. So outside of our room, there is actual violence going on. But inside the rooms in which we have been operating, it's so emotional when you see Palestinians and Israelis that never met each other before, in a couple of hours becoming friends, looking at each other as normal humans. And to construct the future is a challenge. Now I will give you a few seconds to see that slide because it happens to me every time I go to the European Commission. There is a project run by the Digital Task Force of the Commission called Digital Futures. If you are not aware of it, please go and Google it. The major website is called Futurium, and anybody can become a member and contribute ideas to the future. So this is an internal project, and I am honored to be a member of the think tank of that project, that starts with the assumption that the future is not something that we should be anticipating or getting ready for it, but it's something that we should design consciously. And this is exactly what we are doing when we use structural dialogic design with people that are immersed into a conflict. Because when you are inside the conflict, you don't see your way out. So you need to take them out by asking them to envision a future situation which might be further away, in which the conflict doesn't exist anymore. By envisioning that future, they construct a future in their mind collectively as a group, even though they might be in conflict with one another. And what we claim is that this envisioned future acts as a magnet to take them there. There was a very interesting discussion yesterday in one of the working groups whether the future can influence the present. And that's a situation where the future can influence the present. In reality, it's not something new. I mean, think of all the novels that talk about the future, of all the movies that show something that exists in the future, and then many scientists are inspired by that and they try to invent it. So the imagination always drives the future. Now, why am I putting this slide here? This is the main reason I'm also here in this conference. I don't come to this conference every time, and I'm really sad. I'll change that. I will try to come every time from now on. And you know why? Because I am 100% convinced that this community is too small and has more responsibilities than you think you have. because the whole world is falling apart, and everywhere you read, they talk about system science, and we, the system scientists, are absent. The Commission has hundreds of calls for proposals where they talk about complexity of the systems, or of the crisis, and they are begging system scientists to come up with ideas of how to address them. And we should be doing more. And this is also positive news, because I love system science. I didn't study it originally. I studied medicine, and I'm a neurophysiologist, but I did systems engineering later in my life, and all my life I love system science, and I'm really pissed off that it didn't take off. And it's partly our responsibility, and it's also the times that might have been against us. But now is a good time, so I am urging you to do more on the practical area. Now the main example I would... I wanted to honor my colleague and friend, Leko Christakis.
So the original idea is how can we enable the Palestinians and Israelis who are invited to participate in this collaboratory to describe a symbiotic vision for coexistence between those two people. This is something that in our opinion has never been really done with the voices of the people from different walks of life in Israel and in Palestine.
This was a video clip that I took of him when we were in Greece for the Hellenic System Science Symposium several years ago, before the project started, and we were talking over beers about the project, and I thought that was a great sentence to tape, because that was even before the project started, and it says a lot of what I told you before, that it's about developing this joint vision in their mindset, which then acts as a magnet to help them find solutions and reach that vision. And this is articulated also in this video clip by Jeff Dietrich, who is a big supporter of systems dialogic design science, and unfortunately he left yesterday.
The goal with the Israelis and Palestinians was to give them the opportunity to create a situation that was drastically different from the current situation, a visionary future of what ought to be. The goal is to close the planning gap between the current situation, the extrapolated future, and the visionary future. We recognize that there are constraints or obstacles that get in the way of achieving the visionary future. This is referred to as the wall of obstacles. Next, we need to determine the actions that, if addressed, will overcome the obstacles to penetrate the wall and approximate the visionary future, or the vision tree.
Now this slide summarizes pretty much everything we are doing in one slide. If you have people in their current situation and you ask them to find solutions to their current situation, they will have a lot of ideas of how to solve a lot of problems, but what you will be achieving is an extrapolated future, is the same situation in the future. In order to make a change, you need to approach it in a different way. You need to disconnect them from the present. Tell them, imagine that the conflict doesn't exist anymore. Maybe we are 30 years later, we don't care about the time. And I want you to pretend you are people from Mars, visiting the planet, and having your cameras, like Japanese people every time take a lot of pictures, and take pictures of that new situation, and come back in the room and describe it. So this is how we construct this future vision. And then once they have that vision in their mind, it's like having been somewhere, then you have to kind of reverse engineer it. Ask, what is the wall of obstacles? What are all the reasons that doesn't allow me to go there? And we define the wall of obstacles. And then we go and define the actions. What should we do to break down that wall? Go about it. But at the end you develop some maps that are collective. So a lot of maps like this, and every arrow is an influence. So wherever there is an arrow, it means that 3/4 of the people in the room, after having a discussion that went on for as long as they needed, they voted yes. So these relationships are very strong. They are the consensus. They are a very strong consensus. Here, for example, it says mutual agreements and programs in order to create mutual basis for understanding. This came out during the first workshop. We call them collaboratories instead of workshops, because the term workshop implies more that it's being organized by some other people, whereas the term collaboratory means they are experimenting and discovering the truth together. So what we have at the root of the tree is always the strongest factor. Mutual agreements and programs in order to create mutual basis of understanding. This is, let's say, the root of the wall, and then you have to come up with actions, how to address it. Now, how we structured the project, we structured it with having a vision collaboratory, an obstacle collaboratory, then a conference, and then an action collaboratory. So this is like a 7 to 10 day event where we brought the Palestinians and the Israelis that have been chosen to Cyprus, so they are out of context, in a 5-star hotel, Commission pays for it, so that they have a good time, they are isolated from everything else that bothers them, they are not allowed to use their mobile phones for the whole week, and they develop these maps. And then these people, they split into groups. So we are talking about 24 people, splitting into 4 groups, and then every group has to take an action to go back home and enlarge their own group with people with similar beliefs and with a wish to make a change. And they create these bigger groups. And now they are trained a little bit, not enough yet, to use the same methodology to bring in more people in the system. Now, every one of these groups organizes during the time of the project for the next 2 years a lot of, we call them non-formal workshops. So they had the freedom to organize whatever they thought it was useful in their country. And that was a big innovation of this particular project, in the sense that the Commission approved it with very high score in the beginning, but when we started it, they stopped it. They sent us a letter that they want to investigate the project because they approved €1 million without us having to commit anything. Because we haven't told them what these people are going to do. We gave the freedom to them to decide what they must do. So every one of these groups could do something different. So they had the money to do whatever they thought was in their current situation important. And at the same time, some of these people and some other people have been trained to become trainers, so that we built up capacity in the region to use this methodology and train more people to be able to use the same methodology. So we had 2 phases of training, and then these trainers did capacity strengthening workshops in civil societies on both sides, sometimes separately and sometimes together, because it has not been easy. I don't know how many of you have been there, but it's like mission impossible to cross that line for Palestinians. So even if we were planning a capacity building workshop months before and we had all the permissions, maybe the night before something happens, the borders closed. So many of these happen monocommunally. But even in the case where they happen monocommunally, because we had people who participated in face-to-face meetings before, they had this emotional connection with the other side. So with Skype, video, and other technologies, we were able to keep the momentum going. And then a second series of advanced workshops. So we're talking about a lot of, like a flower, expanding like a flower of people getting involved, starting with these 16 people in the beginning and ending up with a couple of thousand of people being involved in these workshops. And then parallel to these panel discussions, and a big conference at the end where we brought everybody together, and this is the whole map, just to give you an idea how we envisioned it, one process to feed another process, but also processes to be evolving in parallel. And people, some people are similar and some are new. So it's like enriching the group of peace builders by thousands within a period of 3-4 years. I'm going to give you also a glimpse of some other work from Cyprus. For those who might not know, Cyprus is divided between North and South, Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots. For years we have negotiations going on, and there is not real progress. But one of the major reasons that there is no progress has been that there was zero communication between the two sides. For many years there was absolutely zero communication. I always like to quote Gary Gumpert, because this is so beautiful, what he said many years ago. Cyprus is a communication laboratory and an anomaly. It's a country globally connected, but locally and interpersonally divided. Cyprus is really connected. I mean, we are 1 million people. We are visited by 3 million people a year. Everybody speaks English. Most of the kids study abroad. We are a relatively rich country, but inside our country we cannot move freely. We cannot even go to the beach if it's on the wrong side. And the problem here is that we have different things to negotiate. On one hand, we have Turkey being the winner in the war and occupying a lot of land and don't want to give it back. And on the other side, we have the Greek side, who is the winner in the United Nations and in the legal aspect of the problem. So you have two different things to negotiate. And so it's sharing land and sharing power. And they don't. This is where you need a systems theory to approach this problem, because you have to exchange apples with oranges, and it's not so easy. Or the right of return and the right of property. I have my house in the other side of Cyprus. I visited it a couple of times. The last time I visited it, the woman who lives there, she said to me, next time you come, my daughters might be here. And please keep in mind that they were born in this house. So don't just invade, go and find a bedroom and see everything. I mean, it was like very politely telling me that it's your house, but my daughters lived here 18 years, from 0 age to 0-18. In reality, I lived in that house only 5 years, because my father was a teacher and we were moving around, and that was 5 years I stayed in that particular house, even though it's my mother's house. So this is a funny situation. Who has more right on that house? Who has more right, the right of return or the right of property? Can you do both? It's not so easy. Now, this is a map from the old times. This is a map that every box you see is 40 people. This is what we did in Cyprus about 15, 20 years ago, when we started using structure dialogic design process to strengthen the peace movement. So it allows us to engage more than 3,000 people in developing a shared dream. Now, many people ask me, did it work? Did you solve the problem? Now, this is our weakness. No, we didn't solve the problem. And this is what I was telling Gerald before I started the talk, that the Commission, in the report of our project, they criticized us for being too ambitious. They said in their report, the applicants have misunderstood their role. They didn't understand that their project is about a contract that needs to be fulfilled. They thought they are going to solve the Middle East problem. And maybe that's a positive note to remember, that you cannot, you do the best you can. You cannot do more than that. I also want to tell you, show you very quickly a project that is not about peace and conflict, but is using the same methodology. It's called Cardiac. It was a European Commission project. As you know, the European Commission has a lot of money that is being given out through calls for proposals. And we challenge the process by which they decide the research agendas that must be funded. And we put in an application asking to run participatory workshops between researchers across Europe to come up with their research agendas and then structure them according to influence, to find out which research agendas influence other research agendas, and then develop a roadmap of which research agendas should be funded with priority and when. So like a time-wise roadmap. This proposal created a lot of conflict in the Commission. The score it received was the second, so, and they had money only for one. But there was a fight in the Commission, internal fight, that they should fund it because it questions their own way of operating. And what they did, they cut money from the guys who came first, and they found some money from elsewhere, and they funded us to do it. And actually the results of these projects, which are 3 big maps like that, became a roadmap that they almost copy-paste in Horizon 2020 for research priority 7, which is accessibility. We didn't include the whole research agendas, but we took one domain, which is about accessibility and using technologies to bridge the gaps between people with different abilities. And the last project I want to mention is one that I would like to encourage you to find ways to collaborate or do your own where you are, is the fact that we feel that the current system of democracy is failing. Yeah. We know it's failing. And everybody is afraid to come up and propose something else because we don't really have something else. We need to invent it. Because every time you say that the majority is not right, you sound so undemocratic. But in this methodology, we have proven it hundreds of times that the majority is wrong. In those maps that I showed you before, when you ask people to vote which ideas are the most important, you get some ideas with many votes. When the same people continue for another couple of hours to explore influences of one idea on another, then they change their mind and they find other ideas to be more influential that just a couple of hours earlier received less votes. Now for me, this is the scientific proof that popular democracy doesn't work. It's as simple as that. And it's the same people. So what is the difference? I mean, it's very simple. It doesn't work because we are superficial. It requires that we go deeper into the meanings and explore our ideas for influence on one another and not staying on our position, my idea is more important than yours. But asking the question whether my idea could support yours or could your idea support mine. And let's suppose we have an arrow between the two. People will ask, why will people vote in favor of the other person's idea? Now I'll tell you why. Because if this is my idea, this is Gerald's idea, and it turns out that Gerald's idea influences mine, it means that Gerald's idea has priority. We should invest first on this idea because it will influence that idea. So he can be proud of himself that his idea is the most influential. But I will still be proud of myself that my idea is the gold, is the top. So we take away the burden between the participants to fight whose idea is the most important. So we are doing reinventing democracy workshops all over the world. These are in Cyprus, but now we are also doing in some other countries. We are training a lot of young people to do that. As many of you know, past President Leko Christakis is one of the fathers of the methodology, and this is from whom I learned it. And now the challenge for us is, if we have something that works, and it's really so interesting that it works so good, because I never saw it failing. I did more than 67 applications until now. And when I say applications, I mean a couple of days each. And every time it works, every time you get the same results, every time you get the excitement, every time people want to do something. And they want to do something because they develop a collective energy in the room. And they have a very clear picture of where they are and where they want to go. And this by itself is a driving force. Now the question is, can we scale it up? Because if you do it with 20 people, 20 people is not a big number. Even if they do it again and again and you have a couple of thousand people, it's still not a very big number. And if you need 1 week every time to help them develop this joint vision, it's still very timely and expensive. And I'll give you a glimpse of how we are going about scaling it up and why we think it could be scaled up. It's the same digital revolution that happened in other arenas of life. For example, think of the text being digitalized. What was the revolution that went on from the moment we could digitalize text, or digitalize images, or digitalize sounds? We can process them, we can move them around, we can make a lot of things with them. Now the same thing we do with ideas. We are digitalizing the thoughts of people. Because when we use a triggering question, and this is how we start, we always have a triggering question, and this helps us focus and remain on the subject, it means that all the responses, they have something in common. They are responses to that particular triggering question. And they all have a mother or a father, somebody who said that idea. And they all have a number. We give an idea a number. We say that's the first idea, the second idea, the third idea. That's the idea of Yiannis, of Kostas, of George, of Maria. So every time we need to revisit that idea, we ask that person back to explain. What did you mean? Did you think of that? Would you develop the idea? So ideas have content. And ideas belong also to groups. By categorizing ideas, an idea has a membership in a group. They also have a clarification. I mean, ideas are being stated as a statement, as a one sentence or one word. We call it the title of the book. But then you need to clarify that idea. And that clarification grows. We can even videotape that idea. And we developed an application. It's on Apple Store. It's called Idea Prism. You can download it. No idea gets lost. Something that bothered me all my life is when I go to workshops and I feel like they are stealing my ideas. Because there is some facilitator there taking notes of what I am saying or what everybody is saying, changing what I'm saying it the way he thought I said it, and then at the end of the workshop, a month later, I received a report and my wording is lost in there without my name. Total disrespect of my idea, which was so great at that moment. This is how people feel. And also total disrespect of what I actually said. Now with this methodology, everything is being documented and remains the same. We call it respect for the authenticity of the author. And ideas also grow. Because when you ask me, I say something and we think it's okay. But later, when we have to put it in a cluster or compare it with another idea, I come in front of a new challenge that I haven't thought about. And I need to think at that moment. How do I mean that idea? And then the idea grows. And ideas have influence of one another. And here the last one is adopt ideas. Ideas, yes, I said something, but a lot of other people support what I said, so they become the godfathers and the godmothers of that idea. So the idea is being adopted by others. So this is the driving force for developing a new system that will allow anyone to create a dialogue, invite others to log in, to contribute ideas, to favor ideas, to request clarifications, to cluster them, to evaluate them, and so on. It's called Idea Prism. You can play with it. It's free, of course. And you can do all the processes like we do with our original software, which is called Cogniscope. But you can do a lot more. You can also have the Facebook things built in so that it becomes interesting. But the difference from Facebook is that in Facebook and in other social networking sites, knowledge diverges. Here we are trying to put formulas that the discussion converges. We are still in the beginning, so anybody who has ideas to help us.
The name again?
Idea Prism. These are just images from people from all over the world doing workshops. One of it, we have done it with the digital task force of the Commission.
The greatest learning from me is the experience I had with the structured dialogue, with the methodology that we use in all these processes, which allows people to speak one after the other.
The world really wants system science, and that includes both management systems and system science, as Gerald said, two branches, the methodologies and all of the system science. The world is anxious for it in all these different areas, and yet, to some extent, we're still stuck in the arguments of the past. We need an intervention. The ISSS needs an intervention. The ASC needs an intervention, just to get focused on the future, because we're concerned about the divide between management systems and system science. and we're concerned, a lot of us, a lot of people are so defensive based on fearing that they're dealing with reductionism as the enemy. Reductionism is not the enemy. It's our failure to work together that's the enemy. So I really appreciate you.
Actually, I totally agree with you, and I cannot strengthen that more. I think the society, our community, suffers from the small village mentality. Like in a small village, they think that the goods are limited. And now we are in a moment where the goods are unlimited. The potentials are unlimited. And we still fight among each other whose methodology is the best. With Gerald, we submitted an application. We don't know if it will go through, but if it doesn't go through, maybe we can do it through the community of bringing all the methodologies together. Because they are complementary. They are not exclusive of each other. They are all looking at systems. And this is what the world needs.
Who else wants to ask a question? Okay.
I have a very quick question. At the very beginning, when you had the quotes about the future, you mentioned the website, and I didn't catch the name of that. The website that you showed at the very beginning, or you mentioned at the very beginning when you were showing the quotes about the future.
Yes.
I didn't catch the name of the website.
Futurium. Futurium. It's a website of the European Commission. It's called Futurium. If you Google Futurium, you will find this website where there is a whole world of how you can propose a future, find people who support that future, and maybe organize a workshop towards implementing that future.
Thank you.
One last question from Louis.
So it's from me. Well, it has a personal side and a more philosophical side. The personal side is, how do you feel about what's going on in Gaza right now, after all these interventions? How frustrating is that? And that comes with a bit of a philosophical part, going back to Theodore Adorno, who said, there's no right and the wrong. And looking at that from a systems perspective, what use is it to intervene into a context where we know that the context will not promote that, and the context is dominating the situation and will eventually be the more powerful part. So how do we deal with that? How wise is it then to say, okay, we try to find the good and the wrong in terms of using our resources?
Your question is clear. Of course, it's very frustrating. It makes everyday life very difficult. And on top of it, if it's a project that is funded and it needs to be completed, you also have logistics to respect. But the answer, even though it might be difficult to comprehend and digest, the answer is simple. As long as you make sure that you are not being used by somebody, because that's always a possibility, that you might be in a situation where you are being used, either by the UN or the US or the EU or somebody, to favor one side. Your job is to look at the system, to zoom out and look at the system and empower the agents of the system to become more wise. Because the situation is not something that you can change. You cannot change the result of the war. What you can do is take people outside of that and see the war as the result of their conflict. So the consequences of what is going on is because they have a conflict. And if you go to the root of the conflict and you see the humanity, from the humanity point of view, and people become wiser, and they have a bigger perspective of what's going on, then they will find the answer. I mean, we are only the facilitators. We are only empowering them to do something. Now, what they will do, it's up to them. How successful that will be, I think it's a matter of time. But the general assumption is that when people are wise and they zoom out from their very small world they can always find better solutions, better pathways to go in front. I mean, for example, if you visit Mars-1.com, there are 200,000 people who registered that they would like to go to Mars. In less than 20 years is the plan. So we are talking about conflicts for dozens of years. So if you remind them that maybe what they are discussing is out of time, out of context, would be not important in 50 years, and you transcend them into that future, maybe they see the world with a different eye, and they are capable of making other decisions and coming up with other options. But I agree with you, it has been frustrating all the time. I mean, we are sitting in Cyprus trying to do a project in Israel and Palestine, and we get a telephone call that our partner has been arrested. And he is in prison, and they are hitting him. And then his brother was arrested. Then they took back the permission for them to cross. So there are issues that come in the daily life that make your work difficult. But we as system scientists, it's like a doctor. You know, I'm also a medical doctor. Of course you have pain with your clients, but you need to be professional. I mean, you just do your job. You do the best you can, and you help your patient become well. That's all I can share.
Okay, thank you very much.